Friends, the good news is that Jesus faces his impending doom and darkness with courage and candor. John 18 that we've just heard tells one story from two perspectives. It goes back and forth between one of Jesus and the other of Peter. After the foot washing and Last Supper that we remembered in worship last week, the Roman guard shows up, tipped off by Judas Iscariot, and arrests Jesus and takes him away. They have no specific charges. They see him as a rabble rouser whose time has come to answer for stirring up the hearts and minds of the people. Here in the sanctuary, the bells are going off because daylight savings time has wreaked havoc once again, just like those police showing up to arrest Jesus. Jesus is taken by Roman soldiers, and Peter follows. But Peter's courage only takes him so far. While Jesus is taken inside and interrogated, Peter cannot make it all the way. He stays outside where he again and again denies that he is one of Jesus' disciples. And then Jesus is hit and abused, but stays firm. And finally, the reading continues with those denials before ending with the rooster crowing. Jesus acts with unusual courage, and Peter succumbs to secrecy. As we open up that distinction and go deeper into that throughout this sermon, I wanted to mark the occasion to set the scene. Pam Trombley and Jennifer Lawton, after worship last week, reminded me that this weekend marks 1 year of ministry for me here at Newman. What a year it has been. We started, thank you. The feeling is mutual. In our church and in our world, a year of wonders, sorrows, challenges, and blessings. In the church and in the world, weddings, funerals, baptisms, births. I am so happy to be a part of this church, churches generally, offering the world something critical, essential, and different right now when it's needed the most. Collective purpose grounded in our faith commitments. We take our care of neighbor seriously, rejecting war seriously, providing for the hungry, the lost, the cold seriously, because Jesus did these things. I preached on March 9, 2025 about how significant it was to start in ministry on Ash Wednesday out here in the church parking lot, offering ashes to go. How meaningful it was to serve people on the margins of our Christian tradition who couldn't get into church buildings for traditional services or who were running from practice to school to club, but wanted a moment of connection in the midst of it all. People hungry to be told that we are finite but loved by God and special for our imperfections, carrying more in our hearts, all of us, than any other person can see. What I didn't preach about a year ago, partially because it's not an inspiring sermon topic for a first Sunday at a church, was just how cold I had been on that Ash Wednesday outside, standing in the church parking lot all day, offering people ashes with a frigid, shivering thumb. Grace and I hadn't moved from New Hampshire at that point where we used to live, and so all our belongings, including coats and long underwear and thermal socks and hand warmers, were still in New Hampshire, but we were here. And so I came to Rhode Island thinking I had escaped these things and weathered the elements. The cold of that day leads us back into John together. On the night of this story where Jesus is arrested and Peter distances himself from Jesus, the Gospeler writes that everyone at the high priest's residence had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing around it warming themselves. As far as I can tell, this is the only time in the Gospels when the temperature of an event is stated directly. Sometimes it's implied that it's cold, like when Jesus walks on water on a stormy night, or we imagine it is hot at high noon when Jesus asks for water from the Samaritan woman at the well. But here, the writer says it's cold. It's the middle of the night. People are not at their best. And so perhaps we can give Peter some slack as he shivers his way through the night, waiting to see what will happen to his friend Jesus. He brushes off with lies anyone who tries to connect him to Jesus as Jesus stands trial for the good that he has brought into the world. We can see that Peter is trying to protect himself in a hostile environment by misrepresenting the truth to people who don't seem to matter to the outcome of his story. He lies to a woman guarding a gate, to groups of people who appear to be powerless. But the magic of the Jesus story is that these are the people who make the world change. What if he had trusted himself? If he had told them the truth, that he was part of a movement? We know that Jesus had inspired a lot of people. And perhaps by protecting himself, Peter is also keeping a frigid people from accessing the warm light of Christ on this of all nights. Perhaps these people are just looking for hope in a world where the powers that be are calloused against the use of violence and will kill without a basis for their actions. Peter thinks his connection to Jesus does not matter to anyone else, but it does. Peter in the courtyard and Peter at the fire exposes all of our trouble with this vulnerability, even as we see Jesus finding power in his vulnerability at this critical time. Jesus is taken to see Annas, who is a former official who still wields some soft power in society, maybe like a Buddy Cianci of the 2000s and early 2010s, a leader no longer in office but still part of the conversation. Jesus refuses to play games with this interrogation. And as the former Roman governor Annas finishes fishing for information from Jesus, Jesus displays candor and courage. His teaching all along has been public and open, and there have been thousands of witnesses to the goodness. And he says he has nothing to hide, feels no need to repeat himself. Jesus' words enraged those who are looking for something against him and who hit him across the face. Peter is still out shivering in the courtyard during all of this, feeling helpless. His vulnerable place in the dark and cold foreshadows the vulnerability of the Jesus followers and Jesus movement that they'll face after Jesus' death, in a world that has no restraint about using violence. Jesus models pacifism coupled with courage and straightforward candor and changes the dynamic of everything. It's something for us to pick up today, for us to use, for us to channel, for us to give thanks. We are connected to something bigger than ourselves through our faith in this person who stood up with courage and candor in the midst of destructive forces. We suffer when the world suffers, but we bring joy when there is joy to bring. Help us to be part of this story that repeats itself in the cycles of history, with courage and candor standing up against the forces of violence and destruction in our midst. May it be so, and amen.